What's the hottest moment you've seen by accident? Story 1. This happened when I was about 18 years old. I ran down the steps in the subway in Toronto to the platform as a train rolled into the station, causing a gust of air to blast through. Well, as this was happening, I just happened to glance to my left and just happened to notice the most gorgeous pair of legs I'd seen in a while, attached to an Asian girl wearing a Catholic school uniform, complete with a white top, a red plaid skirt, and high black socks. Now, I don't know what I did to be so lucky as to just happen to notice this beautiful young woman at precisely this exact moment in time, but at just that very second that gust of air blew that skirt right up above her waist. It was something right out of a Japanese cartoon. And well, how do I describe it? Was it that moment that her bare and seemingly bare cheeks exposed itself to me in all its perfection? That the very moment a deep and strong attraction to Asian girls began to develop in my loins? Possibly. I mean, it was just perfect. Smooth, shapely, and the most amazing shade of light yellowy brown. It's a memory that still takes my breath away even 20 years later. What's even more compelling is that 10 years after this all happened, I was in China having the time of my life, which makes me think, did this one accidental exposure change the entire course of my life? I am not sure, but I sure as heck know that I'll never forget it. Before we continue, do us a quick favor. Smash that like button and subscribe to support our channel. Story 2. So, I was 18 years old and had this pretty hot blonde girlfriend I'd been dating for about a month. I asked her to prom, she said yes, and we were both excited. On prom night, I picked her up and everything went smoothly. Afterward, as I was taking her home, she said, "I am pretty sure my mom said she isn't home." Instant alpha kicked in, and I slammed the pedal. We got there in the next 2 minutes. Already making out. We got out of my car. I pushed open the door, and I kid you not, my girlfriend's equally hot mom was on the living room couch with 2 guys banging her. There we were, my girlfriend wrapped around me and those 2 guys pounding her mom. We all stared at each other for what felt like a year. My girlfriend slowly unwrapped herself, and without letting go of my dong, said, "We're going to be upstairs." Then she pulled me by my dong upstairs. By the way, neither of those dudes was her dad. Story 3. Last summer, I was at a community pool party in the neighborhood pool. We had just moved in and wanted to meet some of our neighbors. I brought the kids and hoped others would too. There were plenty of kids there, but not a whole lot of adults, and one childless couple came that appeared to be in their mid to late 20s. The lady was gorgeous. Nice, big, round cakes, toned abs, and big perky D-cups. Not the fake-looking kind, but the all-natural variety, and they are just spilling out of her flimsy bikini top. Well, I am swimming around the pool with my 3-year-old in an inflatable tube, and I see the couple get in the water. They are playing around and whatnot, but I am subtly checking her out whenever I can, as I keep my other eye on my son. After a few minutes, they decide to float on their backs in the water, eyes closed. Now I am rounding a corner in the pool when I glance at them and see that her chesticles have completely freed themselves from their bikini top prison. They are glistening in the sun as her eyes remain closed, and her boyfriend husband is completely unaware. I paused there with my son, who was oblivious, and tried my best not to stare, but dear Lord, these were massive and wet and beautiful. And I was apparently the only one who noticed. This went on for a good minute or so until she put her feet down and noticed that her flotation devices were loose and tucked them in. She looked around to see if anyone had noticed, but I was already splashing around with my son like nothing had happened. I could not immediately get out of the pool, but it was totally worth it. I have not seen her again, but I will be attending future community pool parties for sure. Story 4. So, several years ago, back in college, I ended up moving into a large 5-bedroom house with one of my buddies from high school. Our other roommates included his girlfriend and his younger sister and her boyfriend. I lived in a house with 2 couples. This was a strange house, cobbled together with bits and pieces. It had a large screened-in deck on the back that ran the whole length of the house. At some point, I suspect it was uncovered, and they just covered it in. Towards the end of the deck, 2 windows looked directly into my roommate's bedroom. They did not believe in the concept of blinds, apparently. Anyways, we would throw pretty big parties, there off and on. One night, after a particularly large party, my friend and I were chilling on the back deck just talking. Then they came out. My roommate and his girlfriend had been in the shower and came out into the room in full view of us. They were still in mid-banging from what we could tell. That alone wasn't really hot. However, his girlfriend was a bombshell, one of the most beautiful girls I've seen to date, and she had enormous squeeze bags, hanging right out there for us to see. We were afraid of being seen, and got out of there quickly. However, I will never forget those giant chesticles. Story 5. I was playing poker at my brother's house with a few buddies. I went upstairs from the basement to the kitchen to grab some more beer for the refrigerator downstairs, and as I looked up, I could see into my brother's and his wife's bedroom. My sister-in-law had the door open and was changing. I got a profile shot of her just in her inners. She had a nice rack, not huge, but nice, but her cakes were the real deal. I knew it was relatively big just by seeing her in jeans. But not only was it big and round, but it was also firm. I got a good 5-second look before she walked to the other side of the bedroom, and I could no longer see her. She and my brother got divorced about a year later, and she was crazy. Everyone wondered why he was with her for so long. I knew why. Story 6. When I was growing up, I lived next to a very religious family that had 4 attractive daughters. They also had a pool, which you could see from my parents' bedroom window. Well, one day, I was home alone and went to grab something in their room when I noticed the second oldest daughter, who was about 20 years old at the time, swimming by herself. I got to where I could see her, and she probably couldn't see me, to watch her for a second, mainly because I was a hormonal boy, but also because what she was doing seemed a bit weird. She started out doing what looked like water exercises with her legs, and made her way to the edge every few seconds to perch her elbows on it and dangle in the water. But while she was dangling there, she would look around like she didn't want anybody to see her, and if a car passed by, she would dart to the center of the pool and slowly make her way back to the edge again. This went on for a few minutes, and I was getting more and more curious until it dawned on me. She's dangling over one of the jets in the pool, and it's hitting her right in the sweet spot. I could have very well passed out from all the excitement when I finally figured it out. Those good little Christian girls never looked the same to me again. Story 7. When I was 18, I visited my friend's Lakehouse. He had 2 incredibly hot sisters, tall, tan, and blonde. Even better, they brought friends. My friend and I had a room upstairs while all the girls were downstairs. In the middle of the night, I wanted some water, so I went downstairs. Their door was cracked open as I passed, so I looked inside. Being the nosy teenager I was, I saw all 4 girls, all bare, playing with each other. Oh, and I made this all up. I am so lonely. Screw Valentine's Day. Story 8. In the senior year of high school, our class took a trip to snorkel and scuba dive in Key Largo, Florida. At the location where we stayed, there was also an underwater hotel for guests. When we first got there, we had to learn how to properly snorkel, and we learned near the underwater hotel. So, as we were practicing, all the kids started hanging out in one area and spending more time than normal underwater. One of the instructors swam over near us and dove down to see what all the kids were looking at. A couple had rented an underwater hotel room for their honeymoon and were doing what newlyweds do on their honeymoon, with the curtains open. So, the instructor, in an attempt to warn them, tapped on their window. When they finally noticed, the woman had a look of such fear on her face, and they ran to close the curtains while simultaneously attempting to cover themselves. The man, on the other hand, appeared to be in shocked silence, but just as the curtain was pulled shut, he appeared to have a look of pride, like he was bragging about his incredibly attractive wife to a bunch of high schoolers he would never again meet. We then had a class meeting about how it is improper to watch people when they're doing it. Story 9. When I was 19, I worked as a delivery driver for KFC. I live in San Diego. They only delivered to my area for a few years, around 1998 to 2004. As a delivery driver, I made lots of tips, but my God, it was a mess. Anyway, I was walking back from a delivery, and one of the female employees was in an empty lobby, scrubbing a spill on the floor on her hands and knees. Her back was facing me, and as she scrubbed, it wiggled. I was so fascinated by her. I then married her. Story 10. I was walking down the street in Center City, Philly during the day when I had the sudden urge to look up at one of the apartment buildings. There, on about the fourth floor, I saw a couple fully unclothed banging against the window. She was making her O face and opened up her eye during the peek and locked immediately with mine. I quickly looked at the pavement and just kept on walking. That was terrifying, but weirdly exciting. Story 11. This was during university, a couple of months ago. I lived in a bit of a shady place, because it was cheap, so I had more beer money. Anyway, there were shared bathrooms, and there was a row of showers, opposite a row of toilets. They were all enclosed in stone walls, and it was pretty common for people to leave stuff in the shower while they went to the toilet opposite. I walked in a bit bleary-eyed at about 6 o'clock one morning, turned the corner, and saw one of my hallmates going from toilet to shower, taking off her top as she went, and only wearing underwear on her bottom half. This girl played netball and was extremely athletic, but I had never really thought of her as hot or pretty. Until then, between my eyes still adjusting to the light, and this only taking maybe 3 seconds, in that moment, she looked like an utter angel. She wasn't really one to show off, but I assumed she wasn't expecting anyone else up so early on a Saturday morning. She never saw me. I've not spoken a word about it. Story 12. When I was 18, I was dating a girl with an amazingly beautiful mother. Well, since we were young, I had to call in advance in order to come over. I arrived early and decided to welcome myself into her room, to say hi. Well, as I opened the door, there in the middle of the room was she and her mom changing. The first chesticles I saw was not my girlfriend's. It was an instant, permanent memory. Story 13. I was in a school play back in high school, and it involved a scene with some music-coordinated dancing by S-workers at a bar. One of the girls playing one of the workers was this amazing Brazilian girl who went to my school, and she seriously had the biggest, roundest, and most amazing cakes I have ever seen to this day. We were 3 guys who were supposed to be sitting in chairs lined up while the girls danced in front of us. Each of the 3 guys had to rehearse their parts with the girl in front of him, making sure it all worked on stage. So, when I found out I was going to be paired up with the Brazilian girl, I almost panicked since I almost messed my pants just thinking about her in that situation with me. I was also in a relationship at the time with another girl, and needless to say, my girlfriend was jealous since she had noticed I had a hard time not staring at this Brazilian girl's cakes every time she entered the room. The fact that she used to wear those tight white see-through jeans in school, revealing all of that plump beauty, didn't exactly help my eyes go somewhere else. Fast forward a couple of weeks and I was supposed to practice the dance scene with her in school, in an empty classroom. I walked in and she had put all the other chairs against the windows and walls and put one chair in the middle, the chair for me. As I was walking into the room, I remember thinking to myself, this is the single hottest moment in your life. Enjoy it, man, no matter what happens afterwards. Anyway, I quickly got down on the chair in the middle of the room and she didn't even put the music that was going to be in the play, which was a bit silent and awkward, needless to say. She just started to dance around me, and all I could think of was that my girlfriend is going to kill me, but this is heaven. My life is complete. As she danced on and around me, she kept looking deep in my eyes, which I at the time found incredibly hot. She kept smiling at me. I thought to myself, this can't all be rehearsing. Is she not flirting with me? She was looking at me like she knew what was going on in my head, and she frigging loved having that power over me. The fact that anybody could have walked in, teacher or student, while all of this was going on made it so much hotter. She proceeded to sit in my lap with all that cake, and I tried my best to keep it professional as I lived through the hottest moment of my life. It was all over in a couple of minutes, and she just said, "Well, that's it, not too hard to do on stage, is it?" And I was like, yeah, sure, we totally got this. The funny thing was, I actually didn't have to do much in the dance, just sit and try not to pitch a tent. Afterwards, I exit the room and meet my girlfriend immediately, and she quickly realizes what has transpired. She slapped me, and I just felt a big pain in my face. Still worth it. She could have slapped me all night, and those few minutes with the Brazilian would have still been worth it. Oh, and I had to do it all over again on stage, of course, 2 evenings in a row in front of all the school and parents. Worth it, but it was easily the hardest woody I have had to try to hide in my whole life. Story 14. When I was in college, I was dating a hairdresser. My father came to visit, and I let him have the bed in my studio apartment, with the expectation that my hairdresser girlfriend would let me stay with her. She and I had a falling out, unfortunately, so I was trying to sleep on cushions on my floor, having given my father the bed. My father snored like a compendium of all of the Three Stooges at their worst, and wrapping a pillow around my head was little help. My next-door neighbor was a cute, blonde-haired, blue-eyed girl who liked to run distances. We were friendly as neighbors, and I decided to knock on her door to see if she would let me crash on her floor. She answered the door wearing a terry cloth white with blue striped short nightdress. I explained my predicament, and she invited me into her studio apartment. She had a queen-sized bed, and I asked for a blanket and a pillow, plopping down on the carpet next to the bed. She said I could sleep on the bed next to her if I wanted. This may strike you as insane, but I thanked her and declined. I was not seeing the situation in an intimate way, only one where I was already imposing, and I did not want to be a further burden. Her next comment changed my perception. She said, "I can hear you and your girlfriend, you know," and began to laugh. My hairdresser girlfriend and I banged frequently in my apartment, and she was a screamer. I have not had many regular screamers in my bed, but my hairdresser girl was a non-stop noisemaker. To this day, I wish I had recordings. I laughed and apologized for invading my neighbor's personal space. She made light of it and intimated that she actually liked to listen. "You two are pretty wild. It can be entertaining." We continued to talk in the shadowy darkness, the room partially lit by a low-watt shaded nightlight, me on the floor next to her bed, which consisted of a box spring and mattress, with her just above and next to me. She reached down and grabbed my arm, saying, "You can be comfortable. Get up here. We can share the bed. I trust you." She actually pulled me so that I had to come up. Lying next to her on the bed, I pulled back the covers and joined her, keeping a semi-chaste distance. I was on my side, facing her, and she was on her side, facing me. I still did not know if she was just being kind or issuing an invitation. The hoodie I was sporting, kept safely back from any contact, physically betrayed my interest. After a bit, as we softly talked, she adjusted her position, bringing one knee up between us. Her knee gently moved up toward where my saluting dong protruded with a militarily rigid precision within my boxers. There was no change to our discussion. Her knee, however, came to a stop, lightly touching the underside of my package, and I was almost certain she had to know what she was touching, but she surely didn't in any way acknowledge what was going on. So maybe, just maybe, she wasn't aware of what she was touching with her knee. I was tempted to make it twitch to drive home our point of contact, but if she was not aware, it would have been worse than awkward. It would have been a possible you moment. So, to the contrary, we continued to talk while I tried not to let it throb, and it seemed that the whole of my consciousness was located at the point where her knee touched. We continued to talk about matters wholly unrelated to our actual circumstances. Her knee and my dong continued to connect us, and it was oddly, impossibly sensual. In her laughter at my remarks or in mine at hers, the contact would move a bit and there would be friction at the juncture. But it remained very possible that there was only innocence on her part, while my rigid dong proclaimed loudly the lack of any innocence on mine. We remained touching for a good while, and as the time elapsed, I grew subtly bolder in moving more of my dong in contact with her knee. We began to wrestle and tease one another, and her leg went down. Instead of retreating, I used the momentum of our physicality to bring myself and my stiffy into contact with her body. To heck with any possible ew response after so much torture. I moved to kiss her. Her response was an immediate and inviting openness to the kiss. We had both apparently been fully aware of her knee touching me, but she had chosen to prolong the ambivalence of the touch. I won't belabor our night. We did it slowly, then with tremendous intensity, and it was exceptional. She told me later that night that she not only listened to me and my hairdresser girlfriend's banging sessions, but she also often soloed off to it. There is much to be said for the power of advertising, and for my father's snoring. Story 15. I was living in an apartment at the time, and at around 2 in the morning, my neighbor turned on some music at a ridiculous volume. I put up with it for about half an hour before walking over. I knocked on the door, but it was slightly ajar, so it swung open. He was fully clothed on the couch, facing the doorway, but there was a girl with him, giving him a hand through the hole in his boxers. She looked like a perfect 10, maybe half Asian, and she was making these really hot noises while doing her thing. He sees me in the doorway, and I instantly understood he doesn't want her alerted. So, I point to the stereo. He nods and gives me an OK sign with his hand, and I went back to my apartment. 5 minutes later, he turned the music down. 10 minutes after that, I could hear her achieving multiple ahs. I gained a new respect for my neighbor that night. Story 16. I was young, selling newspaper subscriptions door to door around 7 in the evening. One night, I hit an apartment complex for that easy money, knocked on a door, and before the third knock, the door flew open, and a very attractive brunette in black lacy lingerie and thigh highs came into my life. "Well, hello oh crap," she said, and slammed the door in my face. She was obviously expecting someone else. My sacks dropped that night. Another time, I was delivering a post as a temp job one summer before university. I knocked on the door to this flat, and a woman answered, an absolute perfect 10, wearing what was basically a flannel, having just jumped out of the shower. She said, "Oh, sorry. I thought you were my sister," I replied. "No problem. I have a package for you." Sadly, I was not invited in. Story 17. I was in line for the diving board at the local pool when the girl who had just jumped in ran back into line, with her right chesticle popping out of her bikini. After staring for a good 5 seconds, she finally noticed and giggled as she put it back, which allowed me to learn just how weird it is to jump into a pool and swim with a woody. Story 18. Back in college, I was taking my dog for an evening walk around my neighborhood. She was doing her business when she suddenly started barking at someone's house. Naturally, I looked to see what had caught her attention, and lo and behold, there was a girl from my class, half bare and just out of the shower, looking out her window. I don't think she saw me, but I made sure to give my dog extra treats when we got back. Damn, I miss that mutt. Story 19. Way back when I used to live in the States in Miami, I had a close friend whose uncle was a successful lawyer. He lived with his uncle because he got into too much trouble back home. One day he called me over and he told me his uncle's second wife, who was in her early 20s, was swimming in the pool and that she didn't know we were here. I peeked through the curtains and saw a woman swimming like something out of a Penthouse page. She was drop-dead gorgeous too, and I think I stood there staring for around 30 minutes through the curtains. Story 20. I was camping out in an airport restroom between flights, waiting for the place to clear out. Just as it did, and I started to relax, someone rushed into the stall right next to me. Keep in mind, it was a 15-plus stall restroom, and she picked the one directly adjacent to mine. I heard her unzip her skirt, and then a rapid, wet noise followed. It went on for about a minute or two, then she made some breathy moans for another half a minute. After that, she stood up and zipped out the door, and I was left in a different state of mind. Story 21. So I went camping a few years ago with some friends. We went for a hike and followed a clearly marked trail. As we were about to cross a small river, I stopped the group because I noticed a girl lying down on the other side of the river, in a compromising position with some guy, like there was no chance other people might be walking down the path in the middle of the day. We turned around to head back and they noticed us and got their stuff together real quick. I ended up seeing them again later at a small lake near the campsite, fully clothed this time, and the look she gave us was priceless. Story 22. While working on a roof, I saw a very attractive woman getting out of the shower. I was working on a residential 2-level roof. I am on the lower level walking back to the ladder with 2 other workers. We stop about halfway on one of the roof peaks to have a smoke. This level of the roof had rows of windows along it, and as we stopped, we heard crap. We turn around to see a woman stepping out of the shower and racing for a towel. We all had a good laugh, and she didn't care in the slightest. Story 23. The school I attended was originally just for boys, and the sports changing rooms were built for seniors on one side, juniors on the other, and showers connecting the two. When the school became mixed, they just built a partition in the shower area. After a sports lesson during the winter in our 5th year, the boys were having showers after rugby practice, and we heard the girls larking about on their side of the partition. I don't know how it happened, but 3 of the girls crashed into the partition wall and it just fell. 15 bare boys then stood looking at 15 girls, all bare in one enormous shower. with the wreckage of a stud wall on the floor between us. I don't know how long the moment lasted, but the woody lasted for months. Story 24. Once, I was at a party with about 15 of my close friends from high school. 3 very attractive girls who were good friends of mine at the time, and I went upstairs to get away from some of the crazy drunks. I was eating a roll, and we were watching Man vs. Wild. Anyways, one of them started talking about her nips, and soon enough, the others said she should show them. She said, "But he is in here." So I said, "Don't worry, I just won't look," and continued to eat my roll with my free hand blocking my view while I watched Bear Grylls do his thing. Well, for some reason, that made her comfortable enough to do it, and then the other 2 whipped their chesticles out too. Soon enough, they were all comparing and discussing their sizes. I totally looked. One of them was known for being stacked too. It was probably the highlight of my high school years, seeing as I had pretty much no intimate life until the summer after I graduated. Story 25. When I used to manage a bookshop, I was standing outside smoking a cigarette. It was pouring rain, and I just sat and watched people coming in and out. A woman came in with her 2 preteen-looking boys, and she was covering herself with a jacket while her t-shirt-clad children were getting completely soaked to the bone. One of them was shivering pretty violently. I cringed as I watched her completely fail at parenthood and life. A few seconds later, a man in his mid to late 30s came out with his elementary-age sons. He stopped, pulled his jacket off, huddled his kids in front of him, and said, "Everybody in a casual voice, and he draped his jacket over his sons, wrapped them in his arms, and took off into the rain. All I could think was, damn it all, I want to bang the crap out of you. I honestly had the urge to chase that fatherly son of a gun and pounce on him. Good dads are hot as heck. Story 26. I somehow became my dorm's unofficial math and physics tutor last year. I was helping the hottest girl in my dorm with an optimization problem right outside her room. After I explained a couple of things, she managed to get it on her own, and she was pretty excited that it finally made sense to her. She gave me a really tight hug that I wasn't expecting. I hadn't noticed she wasn't wearing a bra, which made the hug even better. When the hug finally ended, she said, "Oh, haha, I am sorry, I am not wearing a bra," and looked at me as she went into her room. Then I, like an idiot, proceeded to go get food to eat. Story 27. This girl and I, whom I liked at the time, she's now my girlfriend, were playing Cards Against Humanity with some friends. We were sitting on the floor, and she was in these denim short shorts and was sitting with her legs crossed. I then noticed that I could see her downtown area because her shorts were small and the way she was sitting was stretching them just right. Anyways, I was talking to her during the game, and we started flirting. Now I knew about it being out the whole time, and looked occasionally, so as not to draw attention to myself. Anyways, throughout the process of us flirting, I noticed she was getting visibly fluidy. I was exciting her, and witnessing it happen. I ended up taking her home that night, and we've been together since. I don't think she knows that the reason I got enough confidence to get her to come home with me came from me seeing her honeypot and witnessing her getting excited for me. Story 28. I was 18 years old, and had been living in my family home at the time, which was close to a community swimming pool that just about everyone had frequented. One Saturday afternoon, I was home alone, watching TV, eating cereal, and just chilling and bored, as a kid usually is. Then the doorbell rang, once, twice, then in triplets. Someone wanted me to come to the door. I figured my parents came back home. I opened the door, and there was this tall, blonde, blue-eyed 20-year-old girl, completely bare, covering her chest. We just stared at each other for a bit. Things were happening to my Woody that I did not even understand at the time. She then says, "I was at the pool in the changing rooms and my friends pushed me out the door and it locked behind me. So instead of going back to the front and going inside the building and risking being seen, she decided to cross the yard and go to the nearest house and ask for something to cover up her dignity." I was so excited actually. Come to think of it, it was that day that I became addicted to corn, an addiction I am trying to overcome to this day. Story 29. I work in an uninspired office building. Absolutely nothing special about it or the 24 companies there. Coming in from underground parking, early one morning, there was a guy I'd never seen before. This guy was ethereal, like something out of a romance novel. He was wearing sweatpants and nothing else. After passing him at the Coke machine, I went into the elevator lobby proper. Well, if he were a Greek god, here is Miss Universe in nothing but a towel. Blonde, and probably the only person in the Western Hemisphere worthy of that guy. The question was whether he was worthy of her. It wasn't too far from the building's gym lockers. But personally, I figured the couch in the lobby was the recipient of this early morning event. I tried to ignore them, but they, especially she, acted unsurprisingly embarrassed. I wish I'd said hi or something to let them know I was cool with it. They were probably worried I'd complain to security or some other equally jerk move. But I wouldn't have cared if they were trolls, and to complain about these two seemed like a crime against humanity. Someone might as well have fun in that dungeon. I never told my coworkers because they are, well, douches and would even today complain to security. Story 30. I was a pizza deliverer and was working in downtown NYC. I remember having to deliver this order down the block in December. I buzzed the doorbell, and the lady who answered it sounded smashed, slurring words, and it took her a solid minute to press the doorbell. Well, anyway, she lived on the 5th floor, so I walked up and knocked on her door. She opened the door, and immediately I saw the right half of her body, unclothed, trying to hide behind the door. She was blonde and extremely fit. I blushed so hard, and my eyes didn't know where to go, so they looked inside the door jamb. I see an unclothed guy on the floor watching TV in the living room. My eyes spring up, away from him to another doorway, which is a bedroom, and I see 2 unclothed brunettes lying on a bed. There was a strong odor of smoke and musk. I took my money and ran, trying to hide a stiffy while not rolling down the stairs. Story 31. I was working over the summer for my university's electronics lab. Our portion of the campus is a complete ghost town, because we had no summer courses. I stepped outside for a smoke, and saw 2 students banging on a bench on the other side of the courtyard. I just kind of stood there smoking and watching. Eventually, they noticed me and started to leave, but I gave them the thumbs up, and the dude laughed as he pulled his pants up. And 2 semesters later, I passed that dude walking to class. We both recognized each other. He just busted out laughing and fist bumped me. His friends all looked pretty confused, and I was just grinning ear to ear. And we parted ways without saying a word. Story 32. I was flying home for Christmas on leave from the Navy Hospital in 1973. I was still very weak, so I was the first passenger on the plane. The stewardess had placed extra pillows and blankets on the seat across from me. She leaned over to get the last one. She was wearing a garter and stockings, and nothing else under her skirt. It would have been even more exciting. Except, all I could do was imagine I was 6 feet 2 inches tall and weighed about 95 pounds at the time. I had lost so much weight due to my illness. So, all I could do was think about banging her, but even if she had been willing, there was nothing I could have done. Oh, the funniest thing happened at the airport. A tall, hot blonde wearing a skin-tight red dress that barely covered her rear tight enough that you could tell she had no inners on was walking, and I was bored, so I slowed down to avoid passing her, since we were walking in the same direction. As I got to my gate, I noticed an elderly Asian couple sitting on seats facing us as we walked toward them. I had been staring at this lady's rear, hoping the skirt would ride up a little higher. Instead, I ended up watching to see if the old man reacted. She walked and then turned to head to the check-in counter right in front of the couple. The old Asian man didn't move anything but his eyes. You could see him straining to watch without moving his head. I thought that was hilarious, but I was wrong. As soon as the lady in the red dress walked past them, the old woman, also without moving anything else, moved her arm next to the old man and slammed her elbow into his side. He just grunted, but a small smile crept onto his face. It was all I could do not to stop and laugh out loud. They had been married long enough. The old woman knew he had looked, and he figured it was still worth the jab in the side. Story 33. I worked at a campsite in Scotland, and last summer I was out cutting grass on my ride-on mower. I was mowing a patch of grass near some tents and had to stop, as there was a large stone in my way. As I climbed off the mower, I heard the sound of a flap opening. I turned my head to see a redhead girl of about 25 emerge from the tent, and proceed to embark on a series of morning stretches while unclothed. It was without a doubt the hottest thing I had ever come across, and I was honestly surprised I didn't lose control of myself right then and there. Story 34. This was backstage at a fashion show. I was at Yas Mall, Abu Dhabi, and happened to walk past the side door of the changing area. It had been left open, and without thinking, I glanced in, expecting there to be another barrier between the general public area outside and the inside. There wasn't. A very hot model was between costume changes and oblivious to my rabbit-frozen-in-headlights gaze. The door swung shut, and I was back to earth again. Considering how conservatively dressed women are in public here, it felt even more surreal, like a sudden snapshot of pure, unadulterated beauty. Story 35. One time, when I was working at an outdoor produce stand, my coworker and a smoking hot woman showed me her nip by accident. She told me to grab the plastic bags and put them on the racks. Right after that, the magic happened. She bent over to pick up a cardboard box, and her stuff popped out. She doesn't know I saw it. Nobody does. It's my secret. That perfect combination of a wind gust and being in the right place at the right time changed my life. Story 36. My boss once gave a bunch of us fellow ladies in the office some advice on how to avoid getting lipstick on our teeth. She put her thumb in her mouth, wrapped her lips around it, and slowly pulled it out of her mouth. It was surprisingly hot. There were shocked and blushing faces all around. Story 37. I lived in a house with my 18-year-old female cousins when I was about 20. I had just moved in after being away from women in general for 6 months in South America. I came home from work one day to find 3 half-bare women sitting on my living room couch. My cousin had invited friends over for a girls' day in, and this was how I met most of her friends. They all ran out of the room screaming and covering up. I got quite a few apologies from my cousin and her friends. That moment stayed in the highlight reel for years. There was a reason they were all sitting around in their undies, but it was not something I ever remembered or focused on. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.